Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, and today, as you can see, we are talking about my favorite team in the New York Rangers, and we were breaking down their top 10 prospects, their top 10 prospect rankings. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I will be alongside, yes, Nathan Graviteh. You guys probably know his channel, one of the best hockey YouTubers in the game today, has seen tremendous growth over this past year, and deservedly so. I can't say enough good things about him. When he asked to do a collaboration on the Rangers, and he has a video on his channel too with me on it, so make sure to check that out as well if you haven't. But seriously, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for him. One of the best, not just a great hockey YouTuber, but an even better person. I'm privileged to have him on the channel and to be on his today, so make sure to check out his version too after this one if you haven't already, guys. But without further ado, let's get right into this video.
That was a smooth intro.
All right, awesome. How's it going, buddy?
All right, so Rangers prospects. It's time.
Okay, so first of all, I gotta ask, how long have you actually been, I know you've been following every team in the NHL for a bit, but how long do you feel that you've actually started following the Rangers in particular?
Honestly, the Rangers were always a team that I sort of had a little bit of a soft spot for, mostly because of Henrik Lundqvist, gonna be honest there. So maybe I'm bandwagoning in that sense. But the thing that really put me over the top, I think, for just liking them in general, was just that whole 2017 rebuild, that kind of boldness. I was really excited for, and I was really excited for a rebuild in New York as well. And as people know, Kaapo Kakko was one of my favorite prospects of all time, and probably is my favorite prospect of all time. He, of course, went to the Rangers at second last year. But I've been just trying to keep up with the Rangers' whole rebuild for a while now, and they've been such a fun and interesting team to cover that, honestly, I just like them the more I talked about them. With how many good prospects they have in the pool, they're already a pretty exciting team, but they're going to be even more so in the next few years. So that team, especially this year as well, kind of grew on me a lot. And obviously Kaapo Kakko is my boy. So being able to watch him and hopefully see him do very well with the Rangers is very fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think now's the time, if any, for, say, fans that want to hop on the bandwagon, if you will, right before things really start to roll. So I can't blame you there at all. But all right, so this was a very fun list to make. Obviously, we may want to break down a little bit more exactly our rankings starting at 10, just if we feel that maybe it could be one player over the other type thing. But we obviously have a good grasp. So starting off at number 10, we have a guy that I don't think a lot of Ranger fans know enough about, and that is going to be Tarmo Ronan. Now, he's a very interesting defenseman, obviously playing in Liga currently, was drafted by the Rangers back in 2016 in the 4th round. What are your initial thoughts on Tarmo, and what makes him crack the top 10 list for you?
Well, for me, Tarmo is just extremely reliable. In the past couple of seasons in the Liga, he's just also put up the point numbers, but to me, Rhiannon does have a pretty solid ceiling too. Just last year in the Liga, he got 19 points in 51 games, but that was a down year compared to what he had the year before, where he got 25 and 58. Now this year he's playing in the Mistis, but I wouldn't really look in too much to that. I mean, he has 4 points in 5 games, which is not bad either. But to me, Rhiannon he exhibits a lot of maturity, a lot of high IQ too for a defenseman, and he does have some pretty good size too at 6 foot. And honestly, for the Rangers, I mean, that was a guy that I was looking back just a few years back when he was starting to really gain traction in the Liga. And it's really hard to think about how he ended up going all the way back to 98th overall in that 2016 draft. To me, Rhiannon is probably, you're probably looking at like a 5th, 4th defenseman, and I don't think he's going to be anything much more than that. But he still has some pretty decent offensive upside alongside a defensive game that, although could still use some work, I think could definitely be NHL ready in a year or two.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I didn't really know much on Tarmo until really these past 6 months, especially Statboy Steven. You probably know him. He's really helped me a lot with breaking down some of the more lesser known prospects, if you will. And from his game, especially this year, because he has had a strong start to the season playing for Turku. And what has really stood out to me about him, and is why he's deserving of being in this top 10 over, say, some other players, if you will, because of the fact that, yes, he isn't flashing his game by any means, but he is one that is surely going to have a strong shot to make the Rangers lineup next year. There's been all indication that because he's on a short-term loan, that he's basically guaranteed, if not almost guaranteed, to come back and then compete in training camp and make a spot on that left side of defense in that bottom pair more than likely. So like it seems obvious that he has a much stronger chance over guys like Keandre Miller, especially because of the signing bonus issues. That's why you might not see guys like Miller or Kravtsov get a lot of playing time this year. And overall, he's just, as you mentioned, a very solid, a very mature, a very steady defenseman. Not flashy by any means, but a reliable one that can eat minutes and very well could be somewhat similar of Ryan Lindgren in the sense where you don't necessarily get anything wow out of him, but he will be a solid placeholder at least for the foreseeable future. And who knows, maybe he'll have more upside than we predict. I think he'll probably be a ceiling of, a bottom pairing defenseman, but regardless, I'm really excited to see what he's going to do. I have a strong feeling he's going to crack the Rangers lineup next season.
I totally agree. And even if he doesn't fully get there, like let's say he plays in the AHL next season, I still think that's a guy you probably get at least like half a decade of bottom pairing, good defensive, reliable play out of him. And that's, that's what the Rangers could definitely use, especially in the bottom half of that lineup. I mean, he's a guy that, as you said, I don't think is going to just frill anybody, but he gets the job done. And I do have pretty big faith in him, not just making the NHL, but being a pretty good mainstay player there too.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better. But I think that's all we have for Tarmo. So now getting on to number 9, we have Matthew Robertson. Now this is my guy. I love Matthew Robertson. Obviously he was drafted in the second round back in 2019, just a year ago, by the Rangers. He's one of those rare occurrences where as a second round pick, he still signs his ELC, which is something that doesn't happen very often, but he was viewed by many as a first round talent. So all indication, as soon as he was drafted, at least my initial reaction, that it was a steal for the Rangers where they landed him. And he's just one of many bigger size puck moving two-way defensemen for the Rangers. As you can see, his stats here, had 34 points in 60 games for the Oil Kings last year. Really had a strong season for them, and he just has so much great qualities between his transition game, bringing up the rush. He can control the power play as well. Not that the Rangers would need him to, but he's surely a guy that could be trying to make a push for the Rangers lineup in a couple years. I don't expect it next year, but probably the following year at least. And I'm really excited about his game. I think he's just one of the many two-way defensemen the Rangers currently have that are going to be making an impact over these next couple of years. So what are your thoughts on him?
I do agree that he was definitely a good pick where they got him. I think last year I had him super early in the second round, like round 35-ish. And obviously he went 49th overall in the second round last year. I think Robertson, I do agree he exhibits a lot of great qualities. Again, 6'4", 201. I don't think he, just like Rhiannon, is going to be anything more than a really solid bottom pair, really decent middle pair guy. But he's also another guy that just gets the job done, I think. There is a little bit of, for me, I wish that he'd be a little bit more engaged. I think he'd be a little bit more aggressive sometimes, and I think that would lend to his offensive game. But I think his defensive game is strong enough and raw enough where you could build it around a bottom pair defenseman who can be good on the penalty kill. I think he's a good player, though, for all situations. He does, again, like Rhiannon, have a lot of great maturity already, and the size definitely does help. I mean, this past season, 47 points in 60 games. In the WHL, that's nothing to scoff at, and he was definitely one of the big leaders there in Edmonton. I'm not sure how far along he is in the NHL. I could see making in a couple of years. I think that's a player, though, that will definitely help to have a little bit more AHL seasoning before he truly transitions, but another guy that you could just put on the bottom pairing in his prime and be very happy with. So yeah, I'm not too mad with having him in the top 10. That's for sure.
Yeah, and he's one of those where I think a lot of other teams in the NHL would have him higher, which just goes to show just how deep this Rangers prospect pool is. We obviously know this, but I think what really stands out to me, and that's a good point too, that he isn't nearly as aggressive as maybe you would like him given his size. But the upside, given the fact that he is, I believe, between 6'2" and 6'3", is the fact that he can come more into his game as he gets older, and he can make those adjustments of being more aggressive as he ages into the NHL. So hopefully that's something to consider going forward. But nonetheless, I think Matthew's definitely deserving of being in the top 10.
Agreed.
All right, next now at number 8, we have Morgan Barron. What are your initial thoughts on Morgan?
Okay, so your boy is Robertson. My boy is Morgan Barron. Now, I want to preface this by saying, yes, he is on the older side. He's 21, center, 6'2", and when you look back at the 2017 draft, I mean, especially later in that draft, Morgan Barron is looking really, really good at 174th overall. And he's a player that's been in Cornell for the last couple of seasons. In his first year in 2018, looked pretty great with 18 points in 33 games, and then would just continue his scoring. I mean, got 34 and 36 in 2019. And then this past season would be over a point per game, being the captain there as well with 32 points in 29 games. Now, I think there's a lot to like. I will say that skating wise, I feel like there's a little bit of ways to go.
Yeah.
I think his acceleration and his top end speed could use some work, but I don't think, especially in the Ranger system, I don't think there's anything that's too mismanageable. And I feel like with Morgan Barron, he just has a lot of underrated playmaking abilities that he was able to show in the NCAA. And I don't think this is a player that's going to be an NHL ready player off the bat. I think he's most likely to play with Hartford next year. But that's a player that if he ends up turning into a third line center, maybe even second line center, I wouldn't be too surprised about. Probably not a top end second line guy, but a guy who can contribute on that middle six, be a great all situational player. And I do think his defense also, it did improve as the season went on, especially this year. So I feel like there's a lot projectability in Morgan Barron's game. I'm not sure how far he gets in the lineup, but that's a pretty great depth player to have in the system. And to have him at number 8, I think is pretty great look for the Rangers prospect pool.
Yeah, I think the Rangers and Jeff Gorton definitely lucked out when it comes to his progression, because he was drafted in the sixth round just a couple years ago in 2017. Has really stood out playing for Cornell, obviously being, I believe he was a Hobey Baker winner, if not finalist. So I think if that is the case, he's one of those where, yes, it's definitely more eye-opening. But my argument, I think, with him is one of my bigger worries besides his skating is just the amount of guys that we see become Hobey Baker finalists, for instance, in college. They never just fully transition to that NHL level because it is still quite a leap. Like the Rangers, as they currently are, have guys in their system in Hartford that are probably going to stay AHL mainstays that were either finalists or winners with over these past 5 years. And I believe Patrick Newell stands out as one of them. So I think when it comes to Barron, he is definitely raw in his game still, but he's made major strides over these past 2 years. So it's definitely a win-win situation for him. He's going to compete in camp to try to crack that fourth line. I don't think he'll get it, and I don't think the Rangers will necessarily be all that interested because of the signing the bonuses with him as well. So those things should be taken into account, but I definitely think a year or two at least in Hartford, and then we very well could see him making an impact in that bottom six for the Rangers.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So now at number 7, we have Brettschneider. Now, when Schneider got drafted, if I was live streaming, as I'm sure you were too, and I was baffled. I was like, there's no way my Rangers are going to take a defenseman in this first round. I was screaming it to the rooftops, get Hendrix Lapierre. I was trying to manifest it for like 2 weeks straight. It was all aligned. He still went to the Rangers pick. But because of the fact that they trade up, they end up getting Braden. And I think looking back now, I'm not nearly as upset about it because I wasn't upset with him as I was with just the shock. I just didn't expect a defenseman, as simple as that. But Braden, the most aggressive player, I think, arguably in this entire draft class. Another big body defenseman, 6'2". He was so coveted, he even go all the way upwards of 15 to the Leafs, for example, which a lot of people anticipated. And a draft class that was so forward heavy and so deep this year, we could all agree. So I think that really stood out to me as to why he was deserving of at least being 7 on the list. I think you could even make the argument to have him at 6, just because of how much pure talent he has. He reminds me a lot of Jacob Trouba to an extent, but actually having a better transition game. I think he has a higher ceiling than what Trouba currently has to offer when it comes to, his back checking, overall his defensive play, and just bringing up the rush. As you see, he can make points happen. And when he would come to the Rangers, probably anywhere between 3 and 4 years, they won't necessarily need him to be that very solid two-way defenseman. He can probably be more in his own zone, given all the other puck movers the Rangers are going to have on their blue line. So he can really hone in on his game and just do whatever he feels is best and most comfortable for him. And that's what really stands out to me. He lays a huge body out. He can control both 5-on-5 and on special teams. He really has all the tools to be the next big, more stay-at-home defenseman, if you will, for the Rangers, even though he does have more offensive potential than, some people may believe.
Yeah, for me, it was exactly the same thing. Because once I heard the Rangers were trading up to that 19th spot, I'm like, holy crap, they're actually gonna get Henrik
Yeah,
Pierre.
right.
And I thought there was no way he was actually gonna drop to them. And then it was Brettschneider. Now I had Brettschneider kind of like the same place that as I had Robertson a couple years back. I had him in, I think, like 32 or 33 in my rankings. And I feel like Brettschneider is a guy that, as you said, I feel like in the Rangers, he's going to kind of be forced to be more of the stay-at-home defenseman, but I think he does have potential. He is one of the older players in this draft. He's already 19, 6'2", 209 pounds, from elite prospects, of course. But I feel like Brettschneider, he has the potential to be a really, really good stay-at-home guy. I think he is still a little bit more on the raw side of things for me in terms of projectability outside of that defensive game, because I think there are tools there to be a consistent, good puck mover. I just think that sometimes he was a little bit overwhelmed in the WHL this year. And maybe that was just because of how much time he was forced to play on Brandon. But I feel like that's a player that with time can be a pretty solid fifth, maybe fourth defenseman for the Rangers. I think that's a player, though, that is going to take a little bit more of a project time of things, because he is 19. He is one of the older players in this draft. But I think that's a player that the Rangers can also, since they have so many defensemen in their pool, can afford to take some time with it. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good mainstay in Hartford for a couple of years, probably make the NHL at around 21, 22, but I don't think that's much of a problem for New York anyways.
No.
But I do see him being a very solid contributor for New York, and I do see him working out well. I don't know if he has complete top four upside. I'm not sure if I'd be comfortable with him being a third or second line or number two guy on the defense. But that's a guy you can rely upon when he's in his prime. And I do think, although I wouldn't have picked him 19th overall, he's not a bad player to have in the prospect pool, and defensively is already one of their best.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I definitely think the potential is there when it comes to his ceiling. He is raw in some aspects of his game still, so I'll definitely give you that. But I think what is important for him as well, and that should definitely be noted, is his leadership qualities. He definitely has a personality where he could very well, if assuming he has a long-term career with the New York Rangers, he can definitely be one of those main alternate captains, or if not, possibly the next captain, just because of what he brings. You know, he's been captains on basically every teams that he's been a part of, especially in junior for Canada. So he has those qualities, and that really stood out to Jeff Gordon and John Davidson in their like Zoom interviews with him leading up to the draft. So I think just that maturity level for a guy of his age and, you know, his size as well, he has a much different personality than what you would expect maybe by his play. So I'm really excited for that aspect of him as well. I think he has a good head on his shoulders.
Absolutely.
All right, next up now at number 6, and this is my guy too, I'm sure is yours, Zach Jones. Initial thoughts on Zach?
I love so much about Zach, aka Zachary Jones. Now, I liked him a lot in 2019. He played for the Tri-City Storm, got 52 points in 56 games. And besides the points, I really did enjoy his offensive game. He still had some good defensive game, but it was a little bit raw back then. And I feel like his puck transition abilities, his puck moving abilities was just so slick, so clean, and so efficient as well. That was a player that I think was a pretty great pick in the third round last year. And he ended up playing fantastic for UMass this last season, getting 23 points in 32 games. And even though he only got 2 points in 5 games in the World Juniors, I thought was the USA's best defenseman. He was that. I thought he looked much better than Keandre Miller, much more prepared.
Yeah.
And that's not a slight against Keandre Miller. I think just Jones was a little bit more prepared for that. And I feel like Jones is a guy that I'm not really sure where he projects. He is 20, just turned 20, actually just a couple of weeks ago. And he is more on the smaller side of things at a 5'10 level. But I think that's a guy that once he gets a little bit bulkier, can really be a player for the Rangers that can fit in all situations, especially on the power play. I think he can be a great pass first guy who can just make the easy play, even make the hard play when he needs to. And I think that's a guy that offensively has a pretty high ceiling. Defensively, I still think there's a lot to work on, and he probably will get some pretty good time in Hartford. But once he reaches his max, I think that's a player you could definitely have in a middle pairing, power play. Maybe I don't know if he'll be like Tyson Barrie defensively bad, but he reminds me of a guy that can really just carry a power play, really carry an offensive game, and still be defensively reliable in his own zone. So I think he definitely brings a lot. And honestly, that's a player that if you have 6 in your prospect pool, you're looking pretty solid, and New York's going to love him in a few years.
Yeah, when he was selected, I was ecstatic just because of the little knowledge that I had on him at the time, and a lot has changed then. And when I see Zach Jones, he's very reminiscent of me in a lot of aspects in how Torrey Krug is and was early in his career. He's a guy that I think that is a possible comparable. I'm not sure if he'll necessarily be to Krug's caliber when it comes to consistent point production. I think that definitely goes in hand with how much he's utilized on, say, the power play, because if he doesn't have significant power play quarterbacking time, then, the point production isn't going to be there as prominent. But nonetheless, Jones really stood out to me last year. I completely agree. I believe he had a better year than Keandre. Obviously, a lot of different factors go into that, and it is nothing slighting against Keandre himself, but Jones really stood out in a freshman year as well for UMass, and I think that's really important. So I'm ecstatic. I think he's definitely a guy that not a lot of Ranger fans are giving enough credit for because of just how deep this pool is and defensively. But I'm really, really excited to see what he's going to do at the NHL level, because he's a guy who I think long-term could be a pivotal part to the Rangers' top 4 defense.
100%. 100% agreed.
All right, next up at number 5, we have Keandre Miller. So Keandre, for me personally, there's so many great things to say about Keandre. I think the forefront thing that we could discuss is the fact that he's only been a defenseman for like 5 years. That's bizarre. He was literally, I believe he was a right winger up until he started playing for the U.S. National Development Team. And then they switched him to defense. And since then, that's just been absurd, because when you look, the Rangers drafted him 2 years ago. He wasn't even 4 years into playing defense, and they already took that chance on him. They traded up for him. And to see how much he has grown in such a short period of time, he has all the tools. He's definitely raw in certain aspects of his game, but he's a really high-flying puck-moving defenseman at the size of 6'3", which is just absurd given how just great he is at bringing up the rush. He can really shut guys down with his transition game. He can be that help 5-on-5 and on the power play as well, as we see at 24 points last year with that team of with the Wisconsin Badgers. And everything went wrong for the Badgers last year, so I'm not going to just slight it on him. They had such a powerhouse team with Turcotte and Caulfield and I believe Holloway, among others. So the fact that they just couldn't gel, I think there were almost too much personalities going on, which led to their failure to an extent. So it is what it is, but Keandre, I expect him to have a bounce back year next year. He's obviously going to be playing for the Wolfpack, in my opinion, at least. He will be trying to crack that roster spot. He will probably get a cup of coffee with the Rangers. I wouldn't necessarily bank on much more than that unless he just absolutely wows them from day one in camp. So we'll see what happens there, but Keandre, I cannot say enough good things about the guy. He has a great personality, another guy who could really be the leader on and off the ice. So what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, to me, Keandre absolutely has all the tools. And you mentioned how he was a winger. To me, defensively, I mean, that's probably his strongest suit right now. Obviously, the size helps at 6'4", but when he's on his game, he is just so calm, so collected, and it's like nothing phases him at all. And again, that size does help him in that extent, but I think Keandre Miller has just an awesome ceiling. The biggest thing for me that I kind of noticed with Wisconsin was just confidence. Not the whole team in general, but with Keandre Miller last year, confidence is a big thing. Because in the World Juniors, it seemed like he lost all of it after that first game, and it was just never back for him.
Never forget Lafreniere's goal.
Yeah, exactly. That to me kind of rattled him a little bit, and he never just felt the same. And I feel like if he can be a little bit more consistent, if he can have a little bit more confidence, that's a player that is just so fun to watch, so fundamentally sound. And I'm hoping that he's able to find in the Rangers. Obviously, it's a much harder market to find confidence in than a team like the Carolina Hurricanes or something. But I feel like eventually when he does get that spot, when he does progress the NHL, that's a player that has all the potential, I think, to become at least a middle pairing defenseman. I mean, before this year, everybody was saying he's going to be a top pairing D-man, and now people are saying he's going to be nothing. To me, he absolutely has the potential to be a top pairing D-man. We'll just have to see how it fills out between now and then.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. All right, well, next up now at number 4, we both definitely love this guy, and that is Nils Lundqvist. What are your thoughts on Niels? He's just been, I think, one of the most, if not the most consistent prospect the Rangers have had since they drafted him 2 years ago.
It hurts me so badly to put him at number 4.
I know, it's ridiculous.
This guy is a top prospect on probably half of the league. And to have him at number 4 just pains me. I will say this, Nils Lundqvist has proved me wrong in so many ways. And the thing was, he was drafted, of course, back in 2018. I wasn't really as much into the draft as I am now. But I really didn't have him too much on my radar. When I saw him drafted, I was kind of like, it's all right. It's a kind of a risky pick, but we'll see. And so far, that risk has paid off. And it started right after he was drafted in 2019, where he'd play in 41 SHL games, get 10 points. And then the next year, we'll get 31 points in 45 games. Now, he's not on that pace this year, but I still think Lundqvist has all the tools to become a top pairing, at least middle pairing guy, just like Keandre Miller. But to me, Lundqvist just expels more offensive potential. To me, his puck moving is just insane. His skating has really improved, I think, since his draft year, and that's really helped him. And I think his maturity already at 20 years old in the SHL is phenomenal, and he's been proving that so far. That's a player that I absolutely could see being a great, sturdy, reliable, and good all-around offensive D-man for the Rangers. And he really doesn't have too many weaknesses right now. I mean, again, going into his draft year, the one thing that was kind of like, I was kind of iffy on was his skating. And as I said, that's really drastically improved, and it's nowhere near a weakness at this point. So I don't think really anything's stopping Lundqvist for becoming a top 4 D-man for the Rangers. I think it will take a little bit more time than some people do expect. I don't think he's going to be a top 2 guy to start out, but that's a player you could definitely rely upon on a defense and definitely build around, in my opinion, alongside Adam Fox, which would look very good as a pairing potentially.
You know, he's just absolutely disgusting, as you mentioned. Like, since he got drafted, I was happy about the pick just because I've always been confident with the Rangers with drafting Swedish players, especially in the SHL. We're not going to talk about Elias Anderson, but outside of that, Niels has just been phenomenal because from all that I've seen, because I've seen many clips of his games, I haven't watched really any of them to the extent of fully, just because it's in the SHL. Yeah. It's not easy, but his puck moving is fantastic as that power play quarterback. He can display that wicked shot in the left dot with the right-handed, just like bar down. He's nasty. So I really think he's going to be one of the biggest parts of the Rangers' success over this next decade, barring any, say, trades that happen. God forbid he gets traded, but the Rangers, I know. I'm just, the only reason why I'm throwing that out there is because the Rangers prospect pool is so deep that they can afford to, say, either not have a couple prospects pan out or, say, be dealt for more of a positional need in a win now stage a couple years from now. So I'm not saying that's going to happen with Niels. I obviously hope it doesn't, but those are just things that you always need to keep in the back of your mind. But regardless, I've been absolutely baffled with how well he's been playing at a consistent level. And I really think that if it wasn't for obviously Vitali's play to start the season, he would be ahead of him as the Rangers' best prospect outside of Lafreniere and one other person. But regardless, I can't say enough good things about Niels. He's just absolutely phenomenal.
He's awesome. That's all I got to say.
All right, well, next now at number 3, and this is definitely a coin flip still, in my opinion, and that is Vitali Kravtsov. Vitali, obviously, he had a slow start last year, found himself playing in the VHL at times for Tractor, who was not a good KHL team, at least last year. This year, it's a different story. They've definitely made some good acquisitions with some more former NHL players, including Pontus Aberg. But nonetheless, he spent time, obviously, in the VHL. He was with the AHL, obviously, and just under 40 games, had 15 points. And he definitely looked a little rough around the edges at first. He was trying to find his comfortability. But once he finally started to get his toes in and really got comfortable on North American ice, I saw some major strides from him. So Kravtsov hasn't skipped a beat. This year, what has really shocked me is his goal scoring. He's known when he was drafted, his playmaking abilities, what really stood out from me watching him in juniors especially. I didn't expect him to start off the season as hot as he did. And he just came off of a significant injury. He was out for, I believe, 3 weeks. Comes back and they scores goals in back-to-back games. Really would have had 3 and 2, but one of them was taken back. So Kravtsov is just nasty. I really don't know exactly what his ceiling is going to be, given how he's going to be incorporating this Rangers lineup and when, because I know the Rangers have been wanting him on that right wing when he has been playing left wing as well in Tractor. So it's a matter of where exactly they're going to utilize him and get the most out of him, because Kravtsov can play in that bottom six, obviously, but to get the most out of him, I think you definitely need to have him in your top six more often than not. But what are your initial thoughts on Vitali?
For me, Kravtsov was always just a beautiful fit for the New York Rangers. I mean, the thing is, he's so skilled. He doesn't need to be 6'4" and be as strong as he is, but he is. And to me, Kravtsov has one. If it weren't for Lafreniere and Shesterkin, obviously, I think he could have the most potential out of the prospects we talk about here, because along with that size, his goal scoring, as you said, it's obvious he's worked on that in the offseason. It's obvious he's worked on that scoring touch, on that shot, and it's paid dividends so far. Obviously, Tractor's a much better team, and he's been getting a lot more opportunity as well, which has helped. But again, 10 points in 14 KHL games, that is not bad at all. And I think as much as people kind of downgraded him in his AHL stint, I think that time in Hartford was invaluable for a guy like that. When you're that young, you kind of need to get beaten a couple of times over in the head. And Hartford is a team that was kind of interesting with youth players, at least last year. I think that experience, though, really helped him in just narrowing his mind on what he needed to be. To me, Kravtsov has the potential to be an awesome, like, I'm afraid to say power forward, because he has a lot more of the skill than that implies. But he has the potential to be such a great overall player. And once he makes the NHL team, he gets to learn from guys like Chris Kreider. And that is a perfect role model for a guy like that. I'm not sure if he's going to be as gritty and as energetic as Kreider can be, but that's a player that has all the tools to become a top six forward in the NHL, be a very productive one, and also just be a nuisance to play against. I don't know when that eventually comes. And I think, again, as we've seen, Kravtsov is taking more time than some people expect, but I think people need to have patience with him. Once he finally gets the NHL, I think he's going to kind of feel with home, or kind of feel like home there. I think just a matter of time before he steps in the NHL and starts being just a good player overall. I think that's a player that's invaluable to have on that team and in that prospect pool.
Yeah, and I think what is definitely good to take into consideration with him too, at least from what we've seen this year in his short stint in the KHL, is how he is scoring his goals. He is scoring them in every single way imaginable. He's not stereotypical in how he takes the shot. He's on the power play. He's in that right dot with a left-handed shot, hitting those 1-2s. He just hit a crossbar earlier today, I do believe. And in games prior, he'll be in front of the net, gain that net front presence, gain a rebound, going hard after the puck along defenseman. He will bring it up in the zone, take the shot off the left side at times, like Kreider-esque, if you will. And he has great hands as well. I think really what has stood out to me is just how diverse his game has been. What we have seen over these past couple weeks, the past couple months. It's definitely been impressive to me. And I think this is something that is really opening the eyes of guys like Jeff Gorin and JD, especially, that they're like, wow, he's really coming into his own. And there's no need to rush him. KHL players normally do not take nearly as early as, say, other players do. Like, look at Panarin, for instance. I know Panarin's a different story, but he didn't come into the NHL until he was 24, 25, and look what he's doing now. So guys definitely have a different expectation, and I understand given how high of a draft pick he was. But nonetheless, there's all the more reason for the Rangers to be patient with him, given how deep they currently are, especially on that right wing, even after losing fast. So I'm really not worried about how long he takes by any means. What we've seen thus far this season has been nothing short of impressive.
It's been fun to watch, that's for sure. Hoping for some more of it.
Word. All right, and next up now, at number 2, we have Igor. Igor, I had the privilege of seeing twice last year playing for the Hartford Wolfpack. And first of all, he's just fantastic. He stays out in warm-ups to get slap shots at the point and wristers. He has such a great personality overall. But Igor has just, as a Rangers fan, obviously knowing him since he was drafted all those years ago, back in 2014, that 4th round, he has always stood out to be, the heir apparent to Henrik Lundqvist. That was always the idea, but it was a matter of when is he going to come over? Can this actually become a reality? It felt like a dream. He grew up a Rangers fan. He grew up a huge follower of Henrik Lundqvist. no way this could go as picture perfect as what it has thus far for the Rangers, and let alone it's done just that. But Igor in his short stint this past year, besides getting the accident with Pavel Buchnevich, which was just so bizarre in itself, he had a great stint and looked solid in the qualifying round too, while he was still dealing with a groin injury that he tweaked right in the beginning of that qualifying round. So Igor, he's the future for the Rangers goaltending, as good as Georgiev is. He's definitely the next man up behind Lundqvist, and it'll be interesting to see just how well he does in getting past that torch by Hank.
And I also want to say that he's still pretty tall at 6'1", but he's not like the tallest goaltender out there. And I love that he just has the fundamentals so amazingly down. He is an entertaining goaltender to watch. As you said, a fantastic personality. And he showed that even in Hartford. I mean, the guy is responsible. The guy is mature. The guy is selfless. I think that's a player that you love to have in an organization, and to be able to get him in the fourth round. I mean, I talked about it earlier with the Stars. I mean, they took the goaltender just before Igor Shesterkin, and it's killing them right now. But that's definitely one of the best draft steals over the past decade, at least over the past few years. And that's a player that people kind of forget about, is on the older side of things at 24, hopping into the NHL, but he's a goaltender, so it's not that big of a deal. To me, as you said, Igor Shesterkin, even in his draft year, he was stat-wise one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. And I was able to watch a couple of games of him in 2017, where he would end up putting like a 937 save percentage. And I knew from then on that the kid was the real deal, and there was nothing stopping him. To me, Igor definitely has been one of the best goaltending prospects over the past few years, and right now probably is the best goaltending prospect. And to me, as you said, is the future of the New York Rangers. I mean, to be able to take Lundqvist Frone is not an easy thing to do, but I mean, so far, I had my skepticism of him playing in the NHL that early and really truly succeeding, but the guy stepped in the NHL day one and was just a masterclass. So I think the sky's the limit for him personally. I think you're looking at a top 10 goaltender in the league right there.
Yeah, and I think he's going to make us Ranger fans especially not wallow over nearly as much the loss of a guy like Hank. And it's just so bizarre how everything comes full circle, as I mentioned too. Just the fact that he really grew up a diehard Lundqvist fan in particular, and really just seeing this coming in his own, Hank basically passing torch, being like, this is your team now type thing. And now when you look at his game as well, he is very reminiscent of Hank in how he performs. He's not overly flashy, but he can flash that glove, of course, how Hank is most known. He's not a big goaltender by any means. Same thing with Hank. Hank is not big by any means. And just how they are so composed, they go about things differently, because Hank is an absolute nut in his head. He makes himself such hot-headed all the times, but that's how he rides. I don't think Igor's like that at all. I think he's a lot more composed. But nonetheless, I'm ecstatic to see what the future holds for him. Even at 24 years old, we can hopefully see, for the Rangers' sake, really around a decade of him performing at the best of his capabilities, probably hitting his prime, around that between 20 and 38. So future is definitely bright for Igor as the next man up in goaltending for the New York Rangers.
Absolutely.
And at number one, this one literally needs no introduction, but we're going to give it
surprise of all time.
We're going to give it anyway. All right, so at number one, we have Julien Gautier. No, Alexandre Lafreniere. Okay. But Alexi, I gotta pull it up. I gotta frame this newspaper because I have one behind me of Alexi. This man, no one expected this to happen. I'm still in disbelief. I'm not gonna believe it until he plays his first game with the Rangers, and that's just how it's gonna be. What else is there to say? Over 100 points in the past 2 years in the QMJHL, literally playing for the same team that Crosby played for, and it just how separate he's been from the rest of his draft class as a left winger. He's not a center. It is not common by any means to have a winger be drafted first overall. If it happens, there's a lot of potential and a lot of hype behind that guy. Lafreniere is going to come in the mix as Hank left as a franchise. Lafreniere, love franchise. He's going to be that next man up for them. And I just can't say enough good things. There's so many things to go down, and I'll break down more. But what are your initial thoughts on Laf when the Rangers won the lottery per se, and just overall, how's he going to impact them as soon as next season?
Well, the thing is, you were talking about wingers going first overall. I think the last winger to go first overall was Nail Yakupov. And I'll say this, Alexei Lafreniere is not Nail Yakupov. I'm going to
Correct.
put that right down. Right down. To me, Alexei Lafreniere is the closest thing you can get to generational. I don't think he's quite there. And it's just by a few hairs. I think Alexei Lafreniere, you're looking at probably a top 10, eventually I think a top 5 winger in the league. And who knows, maybe he reaches that number 1 spot. There is some great players out there, obviously, like Panarin, who he's going to have to compete with in year 1. But Alexei Lafreniere just has all the tools. He is a just powerhouse to watch. He overpowers guys. He's not even that big at 6'1", but he looks like he's 6'8" out there, 250 pounds, always. I would say the big thing I noticed with Lafreniere compared to the year prior was the physicality in his game.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Defensively, he was good last year, but he really wasn't as engaged as he was this year. And the physicality really, really helped. He was laying the body a lot more, way more willing to get out there and be engaged every single shift, especially in the defensive zone. That's a player that if he continues that kind of effort, along with the skill he has, along with the shot, alongside the IQ, that's a player that's going to be, in my opinion, maybe the guy for the Calder Trophy and one of the best young players already in the league.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I think because of just how crazy and unprecedented this year has been, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, I need to see him play. I need to be in MSG. I need to see this happen in order for it to really be a reality. You know, I was fortunate enough. I was at the Rangers home opener last season. I got to see Capo play and Panarin and Trouba and Elias Anderson. But nonetheless, I don't know really what else to say. You know, you really hit the nail on the head. His body, his physicality is really what is so important about his game as well. His maturity level. You know, he's not going to get knocked off the puck easily by any means. He wants to command the offense every single time he's out on the ice, bringing up that rush by himself, which is going to be interesting to see how he fares with the Rangers with having some other personalities that have that same attribute. Look at Panarin, for instance, as you mentioned. You know, he's very reminiscent in that sense. And even you can say the same about Mika Zibanejad, who's really finally coming into his prime, and boy, is he something. But I think when you look at Lafreniere bringing into this mix, the Rangers were already going to have a bright future as it is. But now you bring a guy who is borderline generational. I was debating, it's hard for me to go there just because at the end of the day, generational is generational. You know, people throw out these terms so much. Definitely franchise, however. I can definitely get on board with that and then see where that takes him. And he enjoys the spotlight. He takes it kindly, and I think that's going to bode him extremely well in a market like New York City. I don't think it's going to phase him. I think he's just going to soak it all in and just let himself get out and work. So again, Lafreniere, the future is so bright for him in the Rangers, and undoubtedly the best prospect.
I will say this one last thing with Lafreniere is that, as you said with the New York market, I mean, the thing is there can be prospects. I mean, I think we kind of saw it with Elias Anderson as well, but there can be prospects that just get phased, and that happens. I mean, you'll see that in teams like Toronto, Montreal, and New York's obviously something different. But I feel like with Alexei Lafreniere, ever since he was like a preteen, the guy has been looked at as the next fantastic Quebec-born player, and he absolutely will be. I think that's a player that has so much confidence in himself, so much skill already. It's basically as sure of a thing as possible that he not only takes that pressure in, but uses it to become an even better player. And I think for New York, that's just a beautiful fit to have.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I'm just exactly I know you're ecstatic about what the future holds for this Rangers team. So you have no idea how I'm feeling right now. Just, it's all bottled up, waiting to come out. And I simply can't wait. But seriously, Nathan, thank you so much, first of all, again, for coming on the channel to talk about the Rangers. This was awesome. You know, I've been fortunate enough to get a lot of other YouTubers on the channel lately, and you were, of course, on the list, and you've been a huge help to me in developing and growing my channel over these past couple months. So seriously, hats off to you again, and thank you so much for having me on yours as well. This was just awesome.
No problem. Subscribe right now if you're watching this video. Do it or else.
All right, Nathan, thanks so much, buddy. Yeah, guys, make sure to check out the other video if you haven't, of course, and hit subscribe for this man. Help him get to 30,000 subscribers. Yeah, he's gonna hit 30 real soon. So
no, I was talking about subscribe to your channel.
I know, and I'm saying subscribe to your channel.
No, subscribe to your channel. Come on.
You hang up.
No, you hang up. I love you. No, I love you.
All right, guys. All right, that's going to conclude this video. Thank you so much, Nathan. It means a ton, and I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
No problem. Let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers. And that's it for this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with our top 10 list? I understand that, say, some guys weren't incorporated, that one could argue whether it's Carl Henriksen or Julien Gautier, and those are all perfect arguments. Maybe even Will Cooley, but I think that's more pushing it at this point in time, at least. But regardless, it's a fun conversation to be had because of just how deep this Rangers prospect pool is, and it's going to continue to be for at least another year, I would say. We'll see how the Rangers do next season. They're going to be competing for a playoff spot, but I think their future is just so unbelievably bright with all the guys that we mentioned that have strong chances to be a pivotal part of what this Rangers team is going to be over this next decade. And a huge shout out again to Nathan for coming on and having me on his channel. Make sure to check out that video all in the description down below, of course, and hit that subscribe button for my man if you haven't. And also, if you enjoyed this kind of hockey content, hit like and hit subscribe. Check out the previous videos. Check out my other videos regarding my series of teams with the brightest futures that I did regarding the Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, Toronto Maple Leafs, and yes, your New York Rangers. So make sure to check that out. As always, guys, it means a ton, and seriously, thank you all again for being here. I can't thank you enough. We're so close to 2,000 subscribers. Let's get there, guys. I know we'll do it. But thank you all so much, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this top 10 list, and I'll see y'all real soon.